The world stage is witnessing a dramatic shift. There was a time when the arrival of Americans was met with fanfare. The symbolic red carpet rolled out, signifying welcome and opportunity. Now, however, a different trend is emerging. That welcoming gesture is being retracted, the metaphorical welcome mat being pulled back, sometimes abruptly. One after another, influential nations are taking steps that signal a cooling, or even freezing of relations. We're seeing borders becoming less porous, long-standing agreements being nullified, and in some striking cases, United States citizens, including military personnel and diplomats, being compelled to leave. This isn't just happening in isolated incidents. It's becoming a pattern across diverse geopolitical landscapes. The reasons behind this escalating hostility are complex and varied, prompting urgent questions about the current state and future trajectory of American influence in international relations. Is this a calculated play of global politics, a raw struggle for power among nations, or perhaps a form of retribution for past actions or perceived slights? The undercurrents driving these changes are multifaceted, involving intricate diplomatic maneuvers, economic rivalries, and shifting regional alliances. From the sudden exits of military forces from previously strategic locations to outright bans on visas for American travelers and professionals, something significant is undeniably unfolding on the global stage. These developments are not confined to nations traditionally viewed as adversaries or those on the fringes of international power structures. Instead, we are observing these bold moves from established global players, countries with significant economic and political weight. This indicates a potentially deeper and more widespread transformation in how America is perceived and interacted with internationally. The consequences of this shift are far-reaching, catching many Americans, whether living abroad, traveling, or conducting business internationally, directly in the crossfire of these geopolitical tensions. The perceived security and privilege once associated with an American passport seem to be diminishing in certain parts of the world, forcing a reevaluation of assumptions about global mobility and acceptance. As we delve deeper into these occurrences, we aim to uncover the specific instances, explore the underlying causes, and analyze what these trends might signify for the future of American citizens abroad and the nation's standing in the world. We'll examine 10 specific countries where these changes are most pronounced, providing context and exploring the potential ramifications. Stay with us as we unpack these critical global events. The conclusions drawn at the end will synthesize these complex developments. The world has seen a whirlwind of significant events recently, and it's crucial to understand the currents shaping our global reality. Let's examine these developments together. If you find this analysis insightful, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. Your support is incredibly important for helping us continue to bring you in-depth reports and helps our channel grow. Something startling occurred in Africa, an event that seemed to catch the Pentagon entirely by surprise, leaving defense analysts scrambling to understand the implications. Niger, a nation previously considered a key strategic partner in a volatile region, delivered a stunning directive. United States forces were told to pack their belongings and depart the country. This wasn't a suggestion, it was an order ending a decade-long military presence. This development is particularly shocking given Niger's recent history. The nation had previously welcomed over 1,000 American troops onto its soil. These forces were integral to counterterrorism operations in the Sahel, a region plagued by extremist groups. The U.S. had invested heavily, both financially and militarily, establishing drone bases and training Nigerian forces. Now, that entire framework is being dismantled. The country that was once a cornerstone of American security strategy in West Africa is abruptly rewriting the script, tearing up the existing playbook that governed military cooperation. This dramatic reversal unfolded in March 2024, when Niger's military junta, which had seized power in a coup the previous year, formally revoked the long-standing status of forces agreement with the United States. This agreement had provided the legal basis for the American military presence. In a bold declaration, the junta pronounced the U.S. presence illegal, effectively evicting American troops. The speed at which this relationship deteriorated is genuinely astonishing. What factors precipitated such a drastic turn? The answer likely lies in a confluence of elements. Significant power shifts within Niger following the coup, The formation of new regional alliances less favorable to Western interests, potentially involving overtures towards Russia or associated actors, and a burgeoning skepticism across parts of Africa regarding the efficacy and intentions behind foreign military footprints on their continent. There's a growing sentiment questioning the benefits versus the costs of hosting foreign troops. But the most striking aspect of this situation is its context. This isn't a nation formally at war with the United States suddenly expelling its adversary's forces. Niger's move signifies something perhaps more profound, a palpable decline in American influence within regions previously regarded as securely within its sphere of cooperation. It underscores how quickly geopolitical landscapes can change, and how alliances, once thought stable, can evaporate. Consider the broader implications. If a nation like Niger, with substantial U.S. investment and a history of partnership, can shut the door so rapidly and decisively, it raises unsettling questions. Who might be next on the list? Are other American military bases scattered across the globe, reliant on similar agreements with host nations, now at a heightened risk of eviction? The situation in Niger might be a bellwether, signaling a potential trend where countries reevaluate their relationships with global superpowers, potentially leading to a reconfiguration of international military presence and alliances. This single event could have ripple effects, encouraging other nations to reconsider their own agreements, or emboldening regional powers seeking to diminish Western influence. The withdrawal from Niger isn't just a logistical challenge for the U.S. military. It's a significant geopolitical setback that requires careful analysis of its root causes and potential future consequences for American foreign policy and security strategies worldwide. Please make sure to watch this video until the end, as we will be providing concluding thoughts and summarizing the key takeaways from these global shifts. The indicators were present, subtle at first, but growing clearer over time. Russia's relationship with the United States has been deteriorating for years, marked by a series of escalating measures. We observed the implementation of more stringent visa requirements, making it increasingly difficult for Americans to enter and stay in the country. Consulates were shuttered, reducing diplomatic points of contact and support for citizens abroad. A tit-for-tat exchange of sanctions became commonplace, each measure met with a retaliatory response, further straining economic and political ties. These warning signs painted a picture of a relationship heading towards a deep freeze. However, in the years 2023 and 2024, particularly following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia made its stance unequivocally clear, moving beyond diplomatic friction to actions with direct consequences for American citizens. The message was stark. Americans were no longer welcome in the way they once might have been. This shift manifested in several concerning ways. Journalists, vital conduits of information, found themselves targeted. Figures like Evan Gershkovich were detained on charges widely viewed as politically motivated, sending a chilling message to foreign correspondents. Diplomats, the official representatives of the U.S. government, were expelled in increasing numbers, further crippling diplomatic channels. Non-governmental organizations with any ties to the United States, particularly those involved in democracy promotion or civil society work, were systematically banned, labeled as undesirable or foreign agents, effectively silencing alternative voices and support networks. The atmosphere became so charged, one might be forgiven for thinking it was a return to the iciest days of the Cold War, perhaps Cold War 2.0. Yet, the situation is arguably more intricate than a simple historical parallel. It reflects a complex interplay of current geopolitical events, historical grievances, and a deliberate strategy by the Kremlin. You might find it surprising to recall that the significant reduction in American diplomatic presence predates the latest crisis. Russia slashed the American diplomatic staff by over 700 personnel back in 2017, a drastic move even then. But guess what? Things have only intensified since. The situation has escalated dramatically, moving far beyond staffing levels. Today, any American traveling to Russia faces a level of scrutiny unprecedented in the post-Soviet era. It's not just officials or journalists at risk. Even ordinary tourists are reporting being subjected to questioning, digital searches, and suspicion upon arrival or departure. The Kremlin's actions suggest a deliberate policy to limit American presence and influence, viewing interactions through a lens of suspicion and potential threat. Why the surge in tension now? The obvious catalyst is the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the West's unified response, including extensive sanctions against Russia. However, the roots run deeper, involving long-term geopolitical power plays, Russia's desire to reassert its influence on the world stage, and perhaps a degree of political maneuvering aimed at a domestic audience. The real concern for American citizens is the rapidity and severity of these changes. The environment can shift unpredictably, and what was permissible yesterday might be grounds for detention today. This escalating hostility raises fundamental questions about the future of U.S.-Russia relations and, more immediately, the safety and viability of any American presence, whether for travel, business, or residency, within Russia's borders. It signals a definitive closing of doors and a clear message that the era of relatively open engagement is over, replaced by an atmosphere of deep mistrust and overt antagonism. It once represented a land of immense opportunity, a place where global business converged, top universities attracted bright minds, and endless connections seemed possible. For decades, American businesses, students, and travelers flocked to China, drawn by its burgeoning economy and cultural richness. Major corporations established vast operations, educational exchange programs flourished, and tourism boomed. China was seen not just as a manufacturing powerhouse, but as a vital partner in the globalized world, a place to invest, learn, and explore. However, the landscape has dramatically altered. China has fundamentally changed the rules of engagement, and the welcome mat, once wide open, has been progressively replaced by a metaphorical red flag. You would be genuinely shocked by how quickly the environment has shifted. What once felt like an open invitation for Americans is now increasingly characterized by layers of suspicion, pervasive surveillance, and the sudden imposition of restrictions that directly impact citizens of the United States. This transformation affects everyone, not just those involved in sensitive political or journalistic work. We're talking about professors, chief executive officers, students, and even ordinary tourists who now navigate a far more complex and potentially perilous environment. The shift didn't occur in a vacuum or overnight, but the cumulative changes over the last few years, particularly between 2023 and 2024, have been profound. U.S.-China relations have become severely strained, reaching a point where simply possessing an American passport can subject an individual to intense scrutiny and place them under the microscope of state security apparatuses. Major American tech companies like Microsoft and LinkedIn have significantly reduced their operations or withdrawn key services from the mainland, citing the increasingly challenging regulatory and political environment. Educational exchange programs, once robust bridges between cultures, have been curtailed or suspended due to political tensions and concerns over academic freedom and potential risks to participants. Some United States citizens have found themselves barred from leaving the country, placed under arbitrary exit bans without clear explanation or legal recourse, sometimes related to business disputes or perceived political sensitivities. Yes, you heard that correctly. Exit bans, trapping individuals indefinitely. Why this dramatic change? Officially, the narrative often revolves around national security concerns, with China citing the need to protect itself from foreign interference and espionage. Unofficial interpretations point to a growing mistrust fueled by geopolitical rivalry, trade disputes, technological competition, and differing ideologies. Americans are increasingly viewed through a political lens, their presence sometimes perceived as inherently suspicious or potentially linked to U.S. government interests. Ask yourself this critical question. If someone merely studying abroad can suddenly face intense questioning, or if a business executive can be held hostage over a commercial dispute that becomes politicized, what does that signify for the safety and freedom of everyday American travelers, or those simply visiting family? What about academics pursuing research or journalists attempting to report on the ground? The implications are chilling. And here's perhaps the wildest aspect of this evolving situation. Many of these changes are implemented subtly, quietly, often operating under the radar until an individual finds themselves caught in the middle of it. New laws, like the updated anti-espionage law, broaden the scope of activities considered threats to national security, creating ambiguity and increasing risks for foreigners. The once vibrant flow of people and ideas is being constricted, replaced by caution and uncertainty. While China remains deeply interconnected with the U.S. economy through trade, the rising tensions are creating a paradox. How long can deep economic ties coexist with profound political mistrust and increasing restrictions on people-to-people contact? Are we witnessing a deliberate, albeit gradual, decoupling in terms of human interaction? Or is this a warning shot, a high-stakes negotiation tactic in a larger geopolitical game? This isn't Cold War theatrics. It's the current, unfolding reality for Americans engaging with China, a reality marked by unpredictability and heightened risk. Consider this: no advance warnings, no opportunities for a second chance, and in some harrowing instances, seemingly no way out once entangled. The next country on our list has long been a complex and often adversarial figure in global politics, particularly concerning its relationship with the United States. But in recent years, its stance towards Americans has taken an even sharper, more perilous turn. We are talking about Iran. Now, you might already anticipate a degree of tension given the decades of fraught history between the two nations. However, what you might not fully grasp is the sheer level of risk that has developed for any United States citizen who chooses to set foot on Iranian soil. You would likely be shocked to learn the number of Americans, particularly dual nationals, who have been detained, often on vague or unsubstantiated charges related to espionage or acting against national security. These detentions frequently occur without due process, sometimes leading to years of imprisonment without formal trial, let alone access to fair legal representation. It's not merely high-profile cases involving political figures or journalists that make headlines. Regular travelers, academics, business people, dual citizens visiting family, and even humanitarian workers have all found themselves ensnared in situations that rapidly escalate from seemingly routine interactions to terrifying ordeals. The United States State Department consistently maintains its highest-level travel advisory for Iran, Level 4, Do Not Travel. This isn't a casual recommendation. It's the most severe warning the U.S. government issues, explicitly advising citizens against going there due to the extreme risks. Why? The primary reason cited is the significant risk of arbitrary arrest and detention. Iranian authorities have demonstrated a pattern of detaining U.S. citizens, using them as pawns in political disputes. Once you are inside Iran, the U.S. government's ability to assist is severely limited, as there are no formal diplomatic relations. Consular services are provided through the Swiss embassy, acting as a protecting power, but their capacity to intervene effectively is constrained by the Iranian government's actions. Think it couldn't happen to you because you have no political affiliations or sensitive business? Consider scenarios reported by those who have been detained: being stopped unexpectedly at the airport upon arrival or departure, being questioned extensively about past associations, social media activity, or academic research. What if you were detained simply for having dual nationality, which Iran does not recognize, meaning they may treat you solely as an Iranian citizen, denying access to U.S. consular support? Here lies the deeper, more insidious issue. Americans are often not viewed as individuals in Iran, but as extensions or representatives of United States policy, regardless of their personal views or reasons for being there. This means that any political tension simmering between Washington and Tehran over the nuclear program, regional conflicts, sanctions, or historical grievances can directly impact the safety and liberty of any American within Iran's borders. Cultural ties, family visits, academic pursuits, or business ventures, all activities that might seem innocuous elsewhere, carry a heavy weight of potential risk in Iran. American-linked NGOs are viewed with deep suspicion. Journalists face extreme scrutiny and potential detention, and even seemingly harmless interactions can be misinterpreted or deliberately twisted by authorities. It's a place rich with ancient history, profound culture, and undeniable pride. But for Americans, it is currently one of the highest-risk destinations on Earth, a place where the political climate dictates personal safety, and where the line between visitor and detainee can blur without warning. You won't find this destination featured on glossy travel blogs, nor will it pop up in casual conversations about vacation spots. Yet for Americans, this next country could arguably represent the single most dangerous place on the planet to visit, a location where the usual assumptions about travel safety simply do not apply. We are, of course, referring to North Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, operates under a regime known for its extreme secrecy, tight control over its population, and profound hostility towards the United States. There is no functioning United States embassy in Pyongyang, meaning absolutely no diplomatic safety net or consular assistance is available on the ground for American citizens. Once inside North Korea's borders, you are entirely subject to their laws and the whims of the regime, completely cut off from U.S. government support. You would be shocked, though perhaps not surprised, to realize the extent of the danger. The U.S. government has implemented a strict geographical travel restriction, making it illegal for U.S. citizens to use their passports to travel to, in, or through North Korea without a special validation from the State Department. These validations are granted only in extremely limited circumstances, typically for specific humanitarian work or journalism under strict conditions, and are very rare. Why such an extreme measure? Because North Korea has a long documented history of arbitrarily detaining foreign nationals, especially Americans, often on spurious charges or for minor perceived infractions. Think that's an exaggeration? Recall the tragic case of Otto Warmbier, a U.S. student arrested and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for allegedly attempting to steal a propaganda banner from his hotel. He was eventually returned to the U.S. in a coma and died shortly after, never having recovered. His case is a stark reminder of the brutal reality that can face Americans who fall afoul of the North Korean authorities. What might constitute a crime? It could be almost anything deemed disrespectful to the regime or its leaders: taking unauthorized photographs, possessing religious materials, having conversations deemed critical of the government, or even seemingly minor actions misinterpreted as espionage or hostile acts. American tourists, journalists, academics, and aid workers have all been detained over the years, often held incommunicado for extended periods, without charge or access to legal counsel. These detentions frequently become international incidents, with North Korea using the individuals as political pawns or bargaining chips in tense negotiations with the United States and other countries. The slightest misstep, an action considered perfectly normal elsewhere, could lead to arrest, lengthy imprisonment under harsh conditions, or worse. You can't simply walk in freely, and even if you were to somehow find yourself there, perhaps through an accident or misdirection while near the border, the prospect of getting out safely is fraught with uncertainty. Let the gravity of that sink in. It's not just difficult, it's potentially life-threatening. North Korea isn't just unwelcoming, it's a legal and political minefield where the rules are opaque, arbitrary, and ruthlessly enforced against those perceived as adversaries, with Americans often topping that list. The risks go far beyond anything listed in a standard travel advisory. It's a place where American citizenship itself can be your biggest liability. It once stood as one of the most frequented countries globally, a vibrant crossroads where Eastern and Western cultures dynamically met. Tourists, drawn by its rich history, stunning landscapes, and bustling cities, arrived by the millions each year. This nation was seen as a bridge between continents, a place of exchange and interaction. However, in recent years, Turkey has undergone a noticeable shift, and for American visitors and residents, this transformation is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. While still a popular destination, the underlying political and security climate has changed significantly. You'd be surprised to learn how many United States citizens have faced detention in Turkey, often not for violating explicit laws, but based on suspicion, association with certain groups, or for reasons perceived as political by observers. This trend has affected various individuals, including journalists, aid workers, academics, and even tourists. One particularly high-profile example involved an American pastor, Andrew Brunson, who was held for nearly 2 years without formal charges initially, accused of espionage and links to groups Turkey designates as terrorist organizations. His detention triggered a major diplomatic standoff between Ankara and Washington, involving sanctions and intense negotiations before his eventual release. But guess what? This wasn't merely an isolated incident occurring in a vacuum. It reflects a broader pattern. Several other journalists, some with dual citizenship, employees of U.S. consulates, aid workers affiliated with international organizations, and tourists have encountered increased scrutiny, questioning, surveillance, and sometimes visa denials or lengthy detentions. It's not just individuals being targeted. American businesses and nonprofit organizations have also reported facing increased pressure, including closures and investigations, particularly those perceived as critical of the government or linked to movements deemed hostile by Ankara. The overall climate for U.S. citizens has grown more uncertain, and in certain regions or contexts, it can feel openly hostile. The Turkish government, under President Erdogan, has publicly accused various American-linked groups or individuals of attempting to incite unrest or interfere in Turkish politics, often connecting them to the Gulen movement, FETO, which it blames for the 2016 coup attempt, or Kurdish militant groups. This rhetoric fuels political paranoia and increases suspicion towards foreigners, particularly Americans, given the complex and sometimes strained relationship between the two NATO allies. Issues like the U.S. support for Syrian Kurdish forces, YPG, Turkey's purchase of the Russian S-400 missile system despite NATO objections, and disagreements over extradition requests have all contributed to the tension. As these tensions rise, so does the level of scrutiny applied to Americans on the ground. Therefore, here's the crucial question. Can a nation that was once a close ally and a welcoming destination suddenly evolve into a place where Americans must tread carefully? What happens when a routine visit, perhaps for tourism or business, unexpectedly transforms into a legal nightmare based on shifting political winds? What if the country that once embraced partnership now watches your every move with suspicion? Travel advisories frequently warn Americans traveling to Turkey to exercise increased caution, particularly near the Syrian border and in certain southeastern provinces, due to terrorism and arbitrary detentions. While not reaching the do-not-travel level of Iran or North Korea, the language used reflects serious underlying concerns. It's a reminder that in this evolving global landscape, even relationships with long-standing allies can become complex and carry unforeseen risks. What seemed safe yesterday might demand significantly more caution today. Oil-rich, politically intense, and experiencing a period of rapid unraveling. This next nation once boasted profound connections to the United States, particularly through its vast energy sector. However, the situation has dramatically deteriorated, transforming it into one of the most challenging and dangerous environments for Americans. This country is Venezuela. One moment you could be settling into your hotel in Caracas. The next you might find yourself inexplicably placed on a government watch list, facing scrutiny you never anticipated. That's the chilling, unpredictable reality some Americans have encountered in Venezuela. Once a top oil supplier to the U.S. with deep economic and cultural ties, the nation has undergone a tumultuous transformation. The political crisis, economic collapse, hyperinflation, widespread shortages of basic goods, and soaring crime rates have created an environment of extreme instability. You'd be shocked by how drastically things have changed. The United States shut down its embassy operations in Caracas back in March 2019, citing the deteriorating security situation and the breakdown of diplomatic relations with the Nicolas Maduro government. Why was this drastic step taken? Primarily due to grave safety concerns for embassy personnel and the inability to guarantee their security. Now, with no U.S. consular support available on the ground, if any trouble befalls an American citizen in Venezuela, they are effectively on their own, with extremely limited options for assistance from their government. But the risks go far beyond the lack of diplomatic support. Americans, especially dual Venezuelan-American citizens, or those working in sensitive sectors like media, aid organizations, or the energy industry, have faced arbitrary detentions and lengthy imprisonments. Several high-profile cases have involved American oil executives, the Citgo Six, and former U.S. military personnel detained on accusations ranging from espionage and conspiracy to terrorism and sabotage. These accusations are often vague, politically charged, and pursued through a legal system widely criticized for lacking independence and due process. Outcomes are highly unpredictable. The Maduro government has frequently accused U.S. nationals of plotting against the state or engaging in destabilizing activities, often using them as bargaining chips in political negotiations or as symbols in anti-American rhetoric. One wrong interaction, perhaps misinterpreted by authorities, one photograph taken in the wrong place, or even one misplaced comment could suddenly escalate, potentially leading an American into the heart of a much larger international crisis, with potentially devastating personal consequences. Think about this profound shift. A country characterized by stunning natural landscapes, a rich cultural heritage, and historically deep American connections is now largely off-limits, deemed unstable, and deeply suspicious of U.S. citizens entering its territory. You might wonder why anyone would go there at all under such circumstances. Yet, reasons persist. Family ties remain strong for many. Some business interests continue cautiously, and humanitarian needs are acute. However, everyday people crossing these borders, perhaps unaware of the full extent of the risks, find themselves in an increasingly perilous situation. Violent crime is rampant. Basic infrastructure like power and water is unreliable due to shortages and blackouts, and hyperinflation cripples daily life. Amidst this chaos, Americans can stand out like beacons, potentially attracting unwanted attention from authorities or criminal elements. In this environment, the line between being a visitor and becoming a political pawn is dangerously thin and vanishing rapidly. Venezuela isn't just diplomatically closed off, it's volatile, unpredictable, and poses severe risks to the safety and liberty of American citizens. You might assume that a tropical island situated merely 90 miles off the coast of Florida would represent a straightforward travel destination. However, for citizens of the United States, a trip to Cuba comes laden with decades of complex history, political tension, and highly restrictive travel regulations. The moment Cuba is mentioned in the context of American travel, you're stepping into a realm governed by long-standing embargoes, diplomatic friction, and rules unlike those for almost any other country. You'd likely be surprised to learn that general tourism by Americans to Cuba is, strictly speaking, technically banned by U.S. law. Yes, completely banned. You cannot simply book a beach vacation and fly down for leisure as you might to other Caribbean islands. Instead, travel must fall under one of 12 specific categories authorized by the U.S. government, ranging from educational activities and professional research to religious purposes and, importantly, family visits for those with relatives in Cuba. Even if your trip qualifies under one of these categories, the bureaucratic red tape doesn't end there. There are restrictions on where Americans can spend their money. Engaging in financial transactions with certain Cuban government-controlled entities, including many hotels, state-run businesses, and even some specific taxi services linked to the military, is prohibited under U.S. Treasury Department regulations. This means one incorrect booking decision, perhaps choosing a hotel flagged on the restricted list, could inadvertently put an American traveler in violation of United States law, potentially leading to fines upon return. But guess what? The complexities don't stop with U.S. regulations. Once in Cuba, Americans are operating in an environment where they are closely watched. While overt hostility might not be the norm for typical visitors staying within designated areas, the underlying political tension is ever present. There have been concerning reports of mysterious health incidents affecting U.S. personnel stationed at the embassy in Havana, the so-called Havana syndrome, which led to massive staff withdrawals and remain largely unexplained, contributing to a climate of unease and suspicion. No one knows precisely what caused these incidents, but the fact they occurred was enough to trigger global headlines and further strain relations. Embassy services, while technically available, have been significantly reduced at times, impacting the level of support available to U.S. citizens on the island. Visas can be challenging to obtain, depending on the purpose of travel. Flights remain less frequent than to comparable destinations, and the financial restrictions imposed by the U.S. embargo mean American bank cards often don't work, requiring travelers to rely heavily on cash, which itself presents security considerations. And here's something many people fail to realize. Cuba is still officially designated as a state sponsor of terrorism by the United States government. This designation carries significant implications, triggering strict sanctions, limiting foreign assistance, and reinforcing the constant cloud of caution surrounding any form of American activity on the island. So, what might appear as a simple journey to a nearby island paradise is, in reality, navigating a diplomatic maze. What if you are detained for questioning simply because of who you meet, or where your itinerary takes you? What if your reason for visiting, even if legitimate under U.S. law, doesn't seem to satisfy Cuban authorities? While widespread arbitrary detention of typical American visitors hasn't been a major issue recently compared to countries like Iran or North Korea, the potential for misunderstanding or politically motivated scrutiny remains. The relationship is frozen in tension, and the risks for Americans, particularly those unaware of the intricate rules or the underlying political sensitivities, are ever present and can change rapidly depending on the diplomatic climate. Before we reveal our final, and perhaps most startling country where Americans are facing an increasingly unwelcome environment, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and ensure your notifications are turned on. Doing so supports our commitment to digging deep into the facts and delivering raw, real, and critical updates about the world. Stories you often won't hear from mainstream sources until it's too late. Your engagement fuels our mission to provide bold, factual, and eye-opening content that goes far beyond the typical headlines. Now, consider this. A nation that was once a crucial center for United States military strategy and operations in a highly volatile region is now effectively a no-go zone, devoid of any official American diplomatic presence. Americans aren't just unwelcome here. They face extreme and immediate risks the moment they contemplate entering. This place is Afghanistan. Since the withdrawal of U.S. forces and the subsequent collapse of the Afghan government in August 2021, the entire structure of safety, security, and diplomatic support for American citizens has completely disintegrated. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul is closed. There is no U.S. government presence on the ground. This stark reality means there is absolutely no protection, no consular assistance, and no viable escape plan coordinated by the U.S. government should things go wrong for any American still in the country or attempting to enter. And guess what? The risks are immense. Americans who remain in Afghanistan, perhaps aid workers who stayed, journalists attempting to cover the situation, or dual nationals with deep family ties, face an immediate and severe threat of violence, kidnapping, or arbitrary imprisonment by the Taliban regime or other extremist groups operating in the country. You'd be shocked how quickly a situation can spiral out of control in such an environment. Even trusted routes, local contacts, or previously reliable networks are no longer dependable under the current regime. The Taliban now controls the country, and U.S. passports are viewed through a lens of extreme hostility and suspicion, often seen as symbols of the previous 2 decades of conflict. Ask yourself honestly, would you willingly travel to a place where your own government explicitly states it cannot help you if you get into trouble? Where the ruling regime views your nationality with inherent mistrust? This is no longer a complex war zone. From the perspective of American safety, it has become a black hole. There are places where danger is an expected part of the landscape. But in current-day Afghanistan, danger doesn't just wait around the corner. It actively seeks out those perceived as outsiders or enemies, and Americans fit squarely into that category. Brace yourself, because the final revelation on our list involves a country perhaps less expected, but rapidly becoming one of the most hostile environments for Americans right within Europe. Blink, and you might indeed miss how rapidly the situation is deteriorating here. This next country, located in the heart of Europe, has quietly but decisively transformed into one of the most antagonistic environments for Americans on the continent. While it may not dominate international news headlines in the same way as some others on this list, the relationship between this nation and the United States has plummeted to alarming new lows, creating significant risks for U.S. citizens. We are talking about Belarus. Behind the scenes, the government in Minsk has significantly increased its surveillance and scrutiny of foreigners, particularly targeting those with any perceived links to Western nations, including the United States. And make no mistake, Americans are certainly not exempt from this suspicion. In fact, they may be subject to heightened attention. Due to its extremely strong political and military ties to Russia, Belarus has increasingly mirrored Moscow's anti-Western policies and rhetoric. This alignment has tangible consequences. American diplomats have faced expulsion or severe restrictions on their activities. Non-governmental organizations with U.S. funding or affiliations have been systematically shut down or forced out. Journalists, especially those working for Western media outlets, have been questioned, intimidated, and sometimes detained. For U.S. travelers, the environment has become unpredictable and potentially hazardous. There are reports of American citizens facing random searches at borders or airports, detentions without clear cause, and intense interrogations by security services. Even seemingly peaceful visitors, perhaps tourists or those visiting family, are being treated with a level of suspicion that was uncommon just a few years ago. You would be surprised how easily a seemingly innocent action, a social media post critical of the government, a misunderstood comment made in public, or even the choice of hotel, could potentially raise red flags and attract unwanted attention from the authorities. And if an American citizen is arrested or detained in Belarus, they may find themselves with virtually no effective legal recourse within the Belarusian system, and limited ability for the U.S. government to intervene due to the strained diplomatic relations. Travel advisories from the U.S. State Department now strongly warn Americans to avoid travel to Belarus entirely, citing the arbitrary enforcement of laws, the risk of detention, the severely limited ability of the U.S. Embassy, which operates with significantly reduced staff, to provide assistance, and the country's support for Russia's war in Ukraine. This isn't just standard cautionary advice. It represents an urgent red alert, signaling a high level of danger. We've now unveiled 10 influential countries where the landscape for American citizens is becoming increasingly risky, unwelcoming, or downright dangerous. From military evictions and visa bans to arbitrary detentions and extreme travel warnings, Americans are facing a growing wave of restrictions and hostility in various corners of the globe. These nations are not just altering their diplomatic stances, they are fundamentally reshaping the environment for U.S. citizens, sometimes turning places of previous opportunity or partnership into zones of high risk. The reasons are complex: geopolitical power shifts, responses to U.S. foreign policy, internal political dynamics, security concerns, or outright antagonism. If you found this exploration of these critical global shifts eye-opening and informative, please ensure you subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends and network. Spreading awareness helps more people understand the real-world risks, the underlying tensions, and the significant changes happening around the world that affect us all. Don't forget to activate the notification bell so you won't miss our future videos, where we'll continue to bring you the most shocking, dramatic, and thought-provoking content rooted in facts, not fiction. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep learning. We value your perspective. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from.